Welcome to another episode of The Dawn of Shades. I'm your host, Gia Scott, and today is September 14th, 2010, and this is episode 426. More about this program and the guests that have provided us with such fascinating conversations can be found on our website, www.exogenynetwork.com. The Dawn of Shades all strives to bring interesting people right to the audience to hear about both new and old ideas. We focus on the people, places, and ideas that don't always make the mainstream news. The sorts of things are frequently labeled as alternative or paranormal. Now, for the show tonight, if you would like to have a question asked, you can email it to me at giascott@exogenynetwork.com or through the virtual auditorium on Pal Talk by text. I monitor the email during the program, so if you're listening outside of the virtual auditorium and would like to have a question answered, please email it to me and I'll ask it for you. Now, in the virtual auditorium, put it in text and I'll try and catch it as the screen scrolls, and if I don't catch it the first time, feel free to repeat it again. And for those who are listening on a podcast, go ahead and email me as well. I'll try and get your questions answered too. And for everybody who likes to feel connected, you can find me on Facebook and Twitter. You can link to me there. There's also a Dawn of Shades fan page on Facebook. You can look at that too. And for the readers and the foodies, check out the articles and blogs. You'll find some material that will interest you as well. Now, tonight's program is a very popular as well as controversial topic. We've explored a lot of topics on this program, and we haven't always explored a lot in the UFO, alien, and related topics. We haven't done it very much in depth either. But tonight, we have a previous guest, an author with a lot of research behind her, as well as a lifetime of experience. And we're going to tackle that taboo topic of UFOs, aliens, and the Bible, all in the same breath. So please, welcome Bonnie Jones Reynolds to the program tonight. Bonnie, it's so nice to have you back again.
Thank you so much, Gia. Glad to be here.
Yeah, well, before we get started on anything, would you be so kind as to introduce yourself to the audience and tell them where they can find your books and whatnot, too?
Oh, okay, very good. My latest book is called The Magdalene, and that can be gotten through my own website, which is bonniejonesreynolds.com. You can get it through Amazon. You can get it through Barnes & Noble. You can order it through any bookstore, really. The publisher is iUniverse. Then there is another book which is also out at this time called If Only They Could Talk, The Miracles of Spring Farm, which is about my workplace, the Animal Sanctuary, Spring Farm Cares. So those are the two books that are available at this moment.
Okay. And tonight's topic, I hear a rumor that it has somewhat of a personal connection with you as well.
As far as UFOs are concerned?
Right.
Yes. Well, very definitely. I wrote down the various brushes that I have had with them, or that close friends and partners and family have had, and I've got a list of 14 here of a wide variety of experience in regard to UFOs. And, of course, when we talk about UFO, we're talking about an unidentified flying object. That is something that flies, that is not something that we can pin down as something that we're accustomed to seeing in the skies. And so would you want me to start telling you some of the things that have happened?
Well, we can share some stories. I'll tell you a few stories that come from my own family as well.
Okay.
What was probably... has any of the sightings or events occurred with a UFO that was in fact not flying, but actually on the ground?
There is one. Okay, back in 1960, when I was modeling in New York City, we were filming a Certs commercial, a Certs breath mint commercial. Do you remember Certs?
Yes, I remember Certs.
And we were shooting it. The location was out in an estate on Long Island, and there was a very lovely lady who was our hostess there. She was the kind of person who was incredibly well groomed, and out in the field was wearing a Givenchy suit with high heels and very proper, serious type of lady.
Mm-hmm.
And at some point, she began telling us what had happened there in that field where we were shooting a few weeks before. She said that, and that this was it was an estate, so they were back from the road, and the field where we were could not even be seen from a main road. And she said that one night, a flying saucer came and landed in that field. And they called the authorities, and because it just sat there, and they called the authorities, and the police came, and the military came, and they cordoned off the place. And I believe she said the thing sat there for a couple of days, and they had the roads closed and everything all around it. They weren't letting anybody near the place. And then the thing just flew away. And that was basically the end of their adventure. The military did a lot of tests with Geiger counters and all sorts of things, I guess, looking for radiation or whatever. And that was the end of that. That is the only one that, the other one is also hearsay in that a very dear friend of mine was he was working in the military, and he was stationed out in an island in the Pacific back in the 1950s. And they were monitoring a Russian submarine, which was lurking around the harbor of the military installation. And all of a sudden, from out of nowhere, came this flying saucer and landed on the water and was sitting there on the water. And the amazing thing is that the Russians themselves were so totally intrigued that the submarine surfaced, and they sat there watching the thing too until it flew away. And then, of course, the Russian submarine dove again, and that was the end of that. But those are the only two situations where they sat on the ground. Everything else has been up in the air.
Well, unlike your story with a very well-groomed lady, mine, I guess, is a little bit more earthy. One of my uncles was a cowboy, and because of his long experience working on ranches and whatnot, he frequently would manage ranches. And he was managing one about halfway between Phoenix and Tucson in Arizona. And he'd been to town one day, and he was on his way back in the truck. And off in a wash, which is a dry creek bed for those people who are not familiar with the Southwest, he sees what he thought was an Airstream trailer. So you would say a silvery cigar-shaped object.
Uh-huh.
And he begins cursing because he thinks it's another snowbird, and they've managed somehow to get this thing down there, and they're stuck. Well, he cannot even get his truck down there. So he goes back to the ranch. He gets his horse, gets some rope. He figures he's going to have to pull these people out with a horse. He rides back to this location. This is a long process. He probably had to ride 10 miles. And he gets there, and it's gone. There are no tracks leading in there. There are no tracks leading out. There was apparently some burns. Now, as far as exactly how the story would, what exactly he found there, because he would not talk. He was one of the most down-to-earth people. He actually had a degree in engineering. He just preferred riding horses to working in an office. But he was very down-to-earth people. He didn't like things that didn't fit his perception of the universe. So it took several margaritas with plenty of Jose Cuervo in them to get him to even talk about this, which had occurred probably in the early to mid-'70s.
Mm-hmm.
And he didn't like to talk about it. And, he couldn't explain it. And therefore, he just didn't like it.
Mm-hmm.
Another one is a little bit, it's more personal. I was out in the forest in Arizona along the Mogollon Rim, and we were in the Apache Sitgreaves Forest, which for people who follow the topic, that's the same general area that Travis Walton was abducted in. Now, I was miles away from where he was. It's a large forest, by the way, but it is the same national forest. And we'd been out camping in an area, and when we came back through, we went through an old work camp. Now, this work camp in the 70s, it had a school, it had a store, it had plenty of houses and whatnot. It was an active living community. But it had been shut down, and the school had been torn down. Most of the buildings had been torn down and were gone. There was just a strip of, like, one-room apartments and a few trailer houses left out there. But as we're coming up the road, because you came up from a canyon, and as we're driving up, over the trees, I saw a brand-new silvery water tower, is what I thought it was.
Mm-hmm.
And my mother and I talked about this brand-new water tower. Now, this is a very dry area. Water is very hard to get. And so this brand-new water tower is quite an interesting development. Now, why, as we drove through the work camp, I never looked to see the base of the water tower, I don't know, but I didn't. And so, we drive through, we go on home. The next day, I'm at work, and I happen to work with a man who had grown up out there at this work camp. And so I'm, telling him all about this new water tower, and he tells me I'm nuts. There's no way they put a water tower. They're still tearing down and getting rid of this old work camp. I said, oh, no, I know, I saw it. My mother and I saw it. We talked about it all the way to town. I didn't imagine this. And he's like, you're nuts.
Mm-hmm.
So, of course, the next opportunity I have, the first thing I do is drive back out there to find this water tower. I was going to take a picture of it to show him. Well, there was no water tower.
Mm-hmm.
The only explanation is that over the treetops, what I saw is a silvery water tower. Might have been silvery and round, but it wasn't a water tower.
Mm-hmm.
That it was, in fact, a UFO. What it was, out there again, I don't know. It wasn't there. It was my daughter, my mother, my son, who was about, I guess he must have been about 8 at the time, 8 or 9 years old at the time, and I, in the pickup truck as we're coming out of the forest, and we talked, like I said, about it all the way into town, which was another 20, 30 miles, and because it was a big deal, this brand new water tower. Yeah, I don't know what it was. But yeah, that was and he wasn't actually on the ground, but 30 feet above the ground, the top of the ponderosa pine trees, isn't that far above it, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
So, sightings do happen. Now, of all the ones that you were involved with, did any of them involve sightings of people or aliens?
No, I cannot say that they were only the machines themselves or the craft, whatever the heck they are. No, to my knowledge, who knows? Who knows? We in a day's time, all of us might run into half a dozen of them and not even know who they are because we do not know the form they take. We don't know what they're doing here.
They might look just like us.
Right, and I've known some very, very strange
people. A lot of people claim that what we see as UFOs is in fact secret government test craft, which, that's conceivable. If that's the case, they've got some very interesting craft.
Well, they have, and actually I've, in my little bank of experiences here, I have seen and encountered quite a few different kinds. There are 3 instances where I have witnessed this exact right-hand turn, this exact right-angle turn that they make. And the very first one I ever saw, I was flying to London, and this was back in the early 1970s. And we were out over Baffin Bay, and I was watching what appeared to be a plane flying along beside us at a distance of, I thought maybe it was 4 or 5 miles away, and just flying along basically on the same trajectory that we were on. And it was very bright. It was very bright, and I assumed that was the sun reflecting off of the metal of the plane.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't know that anything was amiss until whatever it was suddenly made an absolute right-angle turn, shot upward at supersonic speed, and disappeared.
Not a very plane-like behavior.
I called, and, like you with the water tower, you don't very often realize till after the situation is over that you're seeing what you're seeing. Otherwise, I would have asked some of my fellow passengers to look at this thing, but until it made its right angle turn and shot up and disappeared, I had no idea that it was anything other than another plane. Well, I called the stewardess, and I demanded that the pilot come back. And finally the pilot did come back, and he sat down, and he kind of patted my hand and said, now, I've been flying for years, and, they've never seen anything like that. And I said, there is no way you did not see that. There is no way. It was flying alongside us a few miles off there to the right for 15 minutes. And unless you were asleep up there, you had to have seen it. Well, no, we didn't see it. And, it was probably, he gave me this it was probably a weather balloon. Well, I mean, when they give you that kind of ridiculous, absolutely asinine explanation, and you have to say, and I know, we know now that airline pilots and personnel see these things all the time, and if they report them, they get, the report generally gets squashed. And most of the time they don't want to report them because then they get called crazy or whatever.
I've heard they even get grounded. So
it's not a very popular thing. So I know that the pilot saw it. I know he knew exactly what I was talking about, but he was going to demand that I believe. That's
my story, and I'm sticking to it. Right.
Right. Another time when I saw this right angle turn, my then husband, Gene, and I were in Hawaii, and Mauna Kea is a beautiful resort there on the Big Island of Hawaii, and all of the people who work at Mauna Kea see UFOs all the time. All the time. They fly over there all the time. As a matter of fact, one of the waitresses was telling us that they were having a cookout the weekend before, and one of the UFOs came and hung during most of their cookout and watched them. And they're so accustomed to these things that they pay no attention to them. Well, as it turned out, after hearing our friends there in the singers, the entertainers in the band, and the waitresses and whatever, we had been going there several times a year for a long time, so we got to be very friendly with the staff there. And after hearing their stories, one night Gene and I were sitting down on the beach, and we saw what appeared to be what I, in my mind, as I was looking at it, thought was a single-engine plane going directly across the horizon in front of us. Okay, just tootling along very, very nicely, and all of a sudden, it had to have made a right angle, an exact right angle turn, because suddenly it was going away from us. And it didn't make any kind of a gradual turn that a natural kind of turn. It just suddenly was going away from us. Mm. Then suddenly, whatever it was, stopped in its trajectory and came directly back at us. And Gene and I jumped up as it was coming back toward us, and we said, "My God, it's going to go right over. It's going to fly right over us." And it did. It flew over the beach at, I would say it was probably at 1,000 to 1,500 feet. There was absolutely no sound whatsoever. It was 4 lights in a clover leaf, like a 4-leaf clover.
Uh-huh.
And it just glided over us and disappeared up over the Mauna Kea volcano. That was the closest that I have ever gotten to one of them. And
now, going back to, I've got several questions popping up in the virtual auditorium. Going back to the airplane sighting, the first one when you were on the plane.
Mm-hmm.
Did any of the other passengers see it that you were aware of?
No.
No?
No.
Okay. And the pilot denied it as well.
Yeah.
And then the other question is the right angle turn. This is when you're on Hawaii. Was it 180 degrees to the right or left, or was it a 90-degree turn, like straight up?
Okay, no, it was on a level course. In other words, whatever it was flying a level course, and then still on its level course, it suddenly was going away from us.
Okay.
And then, still on that level course, it was suddenly reversed and came back at us and flew directly over the hotel.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, these things are, that's one of the things that people who see them say repeatedly, that they do make these incredible right-angle turns. That whether it's up or down or on a level course, they are capable of this abrupt change of direction.
Yeah. Well, I remember as a kid, we would lay out in the grass. In the summertime, we had a place on a lake in Minnesota, and we'd lay out on the grass. My mom would show us, satellites in the sky, and she'd show us, airplanes and jets, and, showing us the difference in them. And then she would point out one and say, "There's a UFO," and watch. And, they would make right-angle turns. They would do all sorts of strange things in the sky.
Mm-hmm.
And, they were definitely different than how satellites move in the sky. I know I've been on some sky watches with other people, and they're like, "Oh, there's a UFO." And it's like, "Oh, no, that's just a satellite." Watch it, And, they do. Travel's very different. So, what other kinds of sightings, have people told about?
Just in staying in Hawaii for a moment, on another occasion, my husband and I were on the island of Maui, and we went down to the Hana Plantation. And to get to the Hana Plantation, at least in those days, was a very, very long and tedious trip over a tortuous, winding road along the cliffs to get out to Hana. And as we were coming back, we saw this fellow hiking, and so we stopped and asked him if he would like a ride, and he took it. And he was an astronomer, astrophysicist from. They have a huge up there on the one of the mountains in Maui. They have an observatory, and as we were with him for a couple of hours. And he told us that they were having incredible sightings of flying of UFOs. And as a matter of fact, he said that what they were seeing, that the whole thing was going to come out in National Geographic that year. Now this was back in the early 1970s, and he said, "You watch National Geographic because it's going to break there." Well,
okay, did it ever break?
It never did. It never did, because the minute that the military hears about this, they squash it. So he, in other words, he backed up this scientist working there at that observatory, backed up what all of the people at Mauna Kea were saying, is that they're just a dime a dozen around the Hawaiian Islands. But I guess it's something that, people, they're so used to it, they don't really talk about it. And people who see them, like my husband and I, as a matter of fact, my husband, a year later, was claiming that he didn't remember it. He said, "No, we can't have seen that. We can't have seen that. No, I don't remember any of that. I don't remember any of that." He didn't want people to think he was nuts. So.
Well, when we talk about UFOs a lot of times people assume that this all started with Roswell in the 40s. Oh
no.
And there's so many much older stories.
There are 30,000-year-old rock paintings. 30,000-year-old rock paintings that depict that depict flying saucers. That is how long the human race has been recording flying or UFOs.
Even when you take something like Meteor Crater in northern Arizona, which is a very normal, natural sort of event. This is an impact crater resulting from the impact of a meteor. Okay, this isn't, extraterrestrial in terms of like alien technology. But the Hopi Indians actually have a kachina that they associate with that impact site, which is, the impact site is 50,000 years old, roughly.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
There have not been people in North America that long.
Yeah.
But they have a kachina that they associate with the crater that is called Star Chaser in English, obviously, and that's the English translation of his name. Now, when you look at a pre-Columbian tribe, how on earth did they associate that big hole in the ground with the stars?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I find that rather intriguing in itself. This happened before their ancestors could have even been there.
Well, there are petroglyphs in the American Southwest going back thousands of years, and according to Indian folklore, two objects collided high in the sky. I'm reading something here that I got off the net last night. Two objects collided high in the sky, and one crash-landed in the region of Death Valley. Some men arrived, presumably in another ship, and spent some time repairing the damaged craft and were observed by the local Indians. The two images below may possibly depict the ship used by the men who came to repair the damaged craft. In comparing the two images, the one on the right seems to depict a lot of structural damage. Yes, the Indians definitely were recording this and were aware of it, because throughout our history, as I say, they have found at least one petroglyph dating back to 30,000 years ago, depicting these strange craft in the sky. So people don't really realize it, but in much of the many of the pictures of the Virgin and Child, and pictures of the crucifixions by the old masters of the 13th, 14th, 15th century, there are hovering in the background. There are things that look like flying saucers. Now, this is not only the sacred art, but it's in a lot of the secular art as well.
Yeah, I've noticed that. They're frequently featured in it.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't even have to look through a UFO source. If you just go and any website that has detailed, where you can actually see details in the paintings,
mm-hmm.
and a lot of them are available that way online. When you go through that and you look in the sky behind the figures, you will often see what looks very much like a UFO.
Yes. Yes.
Now, people can imagine a lot of things, but you can't imagine something you have no way to begin imagining it.
That's exactly right. There are many people have studied these things, and they have come up with very logical explanations that these were the symbology, that this was religious symbology used repeatedly in religious art. Well, yes.
What is it symbolizing then?
Well, one has to ask, if there are no aliens and no flying machines, where did basically every ancient culture on the face of the earth get such ideas? Why is there such a similarity in representation between cultures? Why did the ancients even bother if this was not very important to them? And why do these mysterious flying objects show up gratuitously in secular and sacred art? Why do similar representations show up hovering over the shoulder of the Virgin Mary or beside Christ on the cross? Why are flying saucers and wheels and discs and strange clouds giving off wondrous light and miraculous beings who ride in and arrive and depart in these conveyances? Why are they so copiously depicted in art regarding the Virgin Mary and the child and the crucifixion? Yes, certain scholars have made a case that these UFOs are not UFOs at all, but just some common religious symbology. But that begs the question, where did that symbology come from to start with? Why was it so widely accepted and understood? Where did it arise from? What inspired it? What is its basis?
And why does it mean nothing now?
Right. And why does
it mean... If it was so important then, why does it mean nothing now?
Mm-hmm.
And really, when you look at it, you're more likely to see images that look like UFOs than you are to see paintings depicting the normal, everyday efforts of the average woman.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you're not going to find anything that does that, but you're going to find a lot of images of a UFO. You find it in the Australian ancient art. You find it in North American ancient art. You find it in South American ancient art, African, Asian, European. Okay, so we've got all these UFOs and, potential astronaut sorts of entities, and it means nothing.
And people also tend to forget about the various flying objects that the ancients were very used to the fact that the quote-unquote gods arrived in miraculous flying machines. When I believe it was Ezekiel who saw this magnificent flaming wheel in the sky, and people were repeatedly being taken up and even taken for rides on these mysterious chariots of the gods. What about the pillar of fire that supposedly went before the Israelites in their 40 years in the desert? What about the Star of Bethlehem?
The voices with the burning bushes. And,
What about
they really had some good drugs? That's all I can say.
They sure did. But there are so many of these instances that were recorded in one way or another, or hinted at one way or another, in our sacred literature, and people refuse to associate them with UFOs, and with the fact that these UFOs have been around for a very, very long time, and that the primitive people were well aware of them. And one then also has to ask, who were the gods, to start with, that came out of these machines, that the people of the earth worshipped as gods? Who were they?
And even things like, the Hopis, when you do some research on it, and anybody can do this research, there's supposedly a UFO calling ceremony. Now, I actually asked a Hopi friend of mine, does such a thing really exist? I was told yes. I mean, there was no chance of ever getting to go to one, but yes, it does exist. It's not something that's done frequently. I guess you might put it in the same category as the Catholics and exorcisms. It exists, but it's not something that they want to talk about a lot. For whatever reason, whether it's because of fear of ridicule or because of the nut factor. Because I've talked to a lot of people that have either known somebody or seen somebody or whatever that really was doing some nutty stuff in regards to the Hopis, because they're so wrapped up. The Hopis' entire religious and historical background has been wrapped up in a lot of New Age stuff.
Yeah.
And so they do get a high rate of attraction for, I guess you might say, the nut factor.
Mm-hmm.
Because whether we all like it or not, anytime you're dealing with anything New Age or UFO or paranormal, we have the nut factor we got to consider.
Mm-hmm.
And it happens, and perfectly good people will do some really crazy things on occasion. It happens, misinterpretations. And you do get a lot of it. And so, they do have that ceremony. It really does exist. None of us are ever going to go to it, but, I was told, yes, it does exist. And that makes for, why would you have a ceremony to call something fictional? Really?
Right.
That ceremony's old.
Right.
Old. Far older than the U.S. government, so why does it exist?
Well, there is one theory, of course, that this is all the U.S. military, and that the UFOs stem from the Nazi programs that were brought over here after World War I. I believe it was called Operation Paperclip, where all of the best German scientists were brought here to the United States and incorporated into NASA and into the military. And there is a lot of evidence, and there are several very good books written on this. I don't have the titles right here with me at the moment, but there are several good books written on it. There's quite a bit of evidence that the Nazis were very advanced in their UFO kind of development of flight, and that some of the secrets were brought back and are incorporated by the military. I tend to believe that maybe that's a partial truth, but I think that there are an awful lot of various civilizations or cultures, alien civilizations, cultures, or whatever, parked up here in the stratosphere around the Earth watching what's going on. And I think that there are many more of them than just one or two kinds, and there are more kinds of UFOs than anything that our military could have put together.
Well, when you do any research on aliens, it's like, it doesn't take long and you come up with, as I put it, 101 flavors of aliens.
Yeah. Yeah.
They do. They come in all flavors. All sizes, all shapes, all colors, and all, you might say, appetites, too. I've even read about aliens that are coming here to eat us.
Well, I don't think there'd be many of us left if that were the truth.
Well, I figure that those aliens are kind of slow because we probably would have tasted a whole lot better 500 or 1,000 years ago.
Right, there's so much pollution right now that.
Yeah.
I got to tell you about one of the flying saucers or one of the UFOs that we encountered here at Spring Farm. And this was witnessed by, there were over a dozen of us.
Uh-huh.
And we were giving a workshop here in animal communication. And the people were camping out in the field beside the main hall. They had the tents and whatever there. And all of a sudden, it was about 1 o'clock in the morning, all of a sudden, we hear this, and I was in the house, and it came out of the house. We hear this, what we call, it sounded like a flying lawnmower, a flying rider lawnmower with this very, 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 very loud, raucous motor that was coming down the hill toward us, and not flying fast at all. I mean, maybe not even going 20 or 30 miles an hour. And so everybody piled out of the tents, and I piled out of the house, and we stood there looking up. And whatever it was flew over. It sounded like it could not have been any more than like 100 or 150 feet above us. But there was nothing there. There was nothing there. Whatever it was kept going, and it kept going toward the city of Utica, which is 8 miles to the north of us. And finally, could not be heard anymore. And so everybody talked about it for a few minutes and then got back into their tents, and I went back into the house, and all of a sudden, here we hear it coming back again. And again, it flew right over us at that low altitude with this, sounding, as I say, like a Ryder lawnmower, an invisible Ryder lawnmower. And disappeared or went up the hill from where it had come in the beginning, and until we could hear it no longer. Now, this we used to be, by the way, we're just 15 miles from Rome Air Force Base, which was a SAC base. And way back then, people were attributing a lot of this stuff to what could have been going on over at Rome. But up over that hill from where the riding lawnmower came, the people in the houses there were very accustomed to seeing mysterious black or white lights out in the fields behind their houses almost every night. As a matter of fact, a lot of them would go and they would take their lawn chairs and they would sit in their backyard and watch these lights coming and going, and just assuming that it had something to do with Rome Air Force Base. And
we used to watch the lights. It sounds very much like that. They were called ghost lights or foo lights, and we watched them in Arizona. And they had been watching them because the Native Americans in the area had long superstitions about them. They'd been around a long, long time. There had been a World War II air base and radar base in the area, but this predated all that. But we call them foo lights or ghost lights, and we would all go out there and watch them too. My partner was coming to work one morning, and it was about 4:30 in the morning, and not light yet. It was in the winter, so it was still quite dark. And as she got just to the brow of the hill from whence the Ryder lawnmower came that time, she glanced over to her left and saw this searchlight coming down out of a cloud, or what she thought must be, at first she thought it must be a helicopter, that there was a helicopter searching for something on the ground. This strong beam of light was coming down. And so she pulled over and opened her window, and there was no sound whatsoever. And there was nothing but a cloud. And the searchlight was coming out of the cloud. And she just got the hell out of there. She said she wasn't going to sit around to find out what it was all about. But the interesting thing is, in many of these, the artwork of the Madonna and Child and the Crucifixion, you have these cloud-like formations with these lights coming down out of them. Yeah.
And she actually, I mean, if she was to draw what she saw that morning, she would be drawing something very much like what these medieval artists were drawing or Renaissance artists were drawing in their various either sacred or profane artwork. Even Voltaire, in one of Voltaire's books, he had a drawing of a man standing looking at a flying saucer. The great writer Voltaire.
Yeah. Now, I know that I saw in the 70s, this was the late 70s, I was out in the desert in Arizona with my dogs, and over a low hill came a helicopter with no sound. It scared the tar out of me and the dog.
No sound, and it was definitely a helicopter.
No sound. I mean, and the pilot was so close, I could see him laughing because he thought it was funny.
Wow.
Now, there was an air base not far away. I assume that's where the guy came from. But there was no sound. I had no warning that this helicopter was going to come over this hill. And anybody who's been on the desert in Arizona knows that most of the desert is pretty open.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this helicopter was flying, the bottom of it couldn't have been more than 12 feet off the ground. And it was literally skimming just above the ground, and it come over this little low hill. There was, a tall tree in that area would be 12 feet tall. Came over this low rise and scared me. I'm a teenager, I'm just out there roaming around with the dogs, rock hounding. And here's this helicopter, and he thought it was just the funniest thing he'd done all day. I didn't think it was very funny at all because, he scared me. I had no idea if I was sure I hadn't wandered far enough to get onto the base land, which was forbidden.
Yeah.
And that should have been another 10 miles from where I was. Surely I didn't walk 20 miles in the desert. I mean, and, without noticing that I'd gone that far.
Well, they're using a different kind of power. It's kind of like the Prius. People are complaining that you can't hear the Prius. You don't know. As a matter of fact, right now the new models of the Prius will be coming out with some kind of a noisemaker to make it more noisy to people outside the vehicle.
Uh-huh.
Otherwise, when they're operating on their batteries, there is no sound.
The hybrid vehicles are very, very quiet.
Mm-hmm.
But
this is interesting because, in other words, then you actually witnessed a helicopter that was using a different kind of energy that was noiseless.
Yeah, I mean, the air was moving and stuff, but it wasn't sufficient to make noise.
Were the rotors kicking up dust? It was so close to the ground. Was it kicking up dust?
In that area, you'd have needed a whole lot more wind than was coming off that helicopter. I mean, it's open, it's hard packed. There's nothing,
Yeah.
It just wasn't going to blow.
Mm-hmm.
There was air moving. I mean, when I saw him, but that was when you felt the air. Was when you saw him. The air wasn't coming ahead of him. They just, I don't know what kind of technology he had, but I know this happened probably 77, 78, 79, right in there. And
so there are the silent kind and there are the noisy kind.
Yeah, I was air evac'd out in the 80s after a car accident. I know that helicopter went waka 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 because I could feel it in my body. It went waka waka waka. So I definitely felt that. I didn't hear anything that day, and I wasn't hard of hearing at all as a teenager.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't like I was walking around with, today you might have headphones on or something. No, just me and a couple of dogs, and I'm out rock hounding.
Yeah. Now, this business of the little lights, for instance, like the little lights that they show in Close Encounters of the Third Kind, that's also been witnessed here at Spring Farm. Again, we were having another workshop here, and a guy came up. He was the husband of one of the ladies who was taking the workshop, and he was the cook at that point, the chief cook down at the House of Representatives in Washington, and he came up and cooked for us for the weekend.
Uh-huh.
And we have a large veranda, a large porch here at Spring Farm, and at that point we had a lot of wonderful cushy sofas there, and he decided it would be really fun to sleep for the night out on one of those sofas on the porch. And he awakened in the middle of the night, and hanging just at the edge of the porch, just so looking at him over the railing, was a light about the size of a grapefruit. And it was just, he said it was watching me. And I said, how do you know it was watching you? He said, I just felt it was watching me. And I said, what did you do? He said, well, I watched it back. And he said, then finally a couple more lights came, and they looked at me for a little while too, then they all flew away.
You know, I have a personal experience with that light thing. I had a particularly crappy day, and after the day was done, I thought, well, you know, I'll go to the store and I'll buy a can of beer, and I'll drive out to the Iron Bridge, and I can sit out there and I can drink it and watch the water. Now, the Iron Bridge was a place, by road, it was probably 12 to 15 miles from town. Down first, you know, a minor highway, then a blacktop, and then a lot of dirt road. And so I headed out that way. In the process, I crossed a couple of metal bridges and whatnot, and go over some other bodies of water, and across the cattle guard. You know, this is a ways out there, you know, in the middle of nowhere. And as I'm heading out there, when I get on the dirt road, I'm tootling along, and about the time that I think, okay, the Iron Bridge should be coming up here pretty quick, up ahead of me, I see what I think is somebody's parking lights and somebody walking back and forth. Now, keep in mind, this is probably about 11 o'clock at night. I'm down a lonely country road in Arizona, and I'm seeing somebody outside their vehicle walking around.
You do a lot of wandering around in lonely places.
Yeah, it's kind of been a lifelong habit. Anyhow, I'm afraid what I'm coming up on is some sort of a drug deal, because that stuff has been going on in the area. And the last thing I want to come up on in the middle of the night by myself when nobody knows I'm out here is that. And it's like, okay, you know, it's really time we go back to town. So I turn my truck around and I head back to town without ever going to the bridge. And I probably hadn't gone 20 yards when off of the side of the vehicle appears this orangish-colored light about the size of a grapefruit.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, what is that? And it's even, for people who are familiar with pickup trucks, it's about even with where that seam is between the truck bed and the cab. So it's slightly behind my shoulder, and it's about an arm's length away from the vehicle. And I'm like, what is that? And I'm thinking it must be a reflection. So I roll down the window and I look out. Well, no window there. It's still there. I swerve. It stays there. I speed up. It stays there. I slow way down. It stays there. I throw the can of beer at it. It stays there. I don't know what it is, but now I'm getting scared. So I'm driving really fast. I cross the cattle guard. I go past these fence lines that come right up beside the road. I get onto the blacktop. I cross over these bridges and bodies of water. So for people who think that I'm being chased by ball lightning, there's no way. Okay, I've crossed too many things that would just attract it.
Yeah.
Anyhow, you know, I'm now coming up to the highway, and there was a bunch of traffic on the highway, and I'm going to have to go ahead and stop. And I'm like, oh no, it's going to get me. I don't know what I thought this ball of light was going to do to me, but I thought it was going to get me. And it just disappeared. Now, I could never see the source of light, you know, like a bulb inside of this object. It was just this even glow of orange light. Not super bright where it hurt your eyes, this even glow. What it was, I don't know. But guess what? It is now time for us to take a break already.
Oh, okay.
So,
oh, wow.
Everybody, stay tuned. In the Dawn of Shades, we'll be returning with our topic. And you can take a minute and check out our website at www.exogenynetwork.com. And don't forget, stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Tune in to UFO Undercover, Wednesdays at 8 p.m. Eastern, with your host, Joe Montaldo, right here on the Paranormal Radio Network.
Welcome back to the Dawn of Shades. I'm your host, Gia Scott, with our guest, Bonnie Jones Reynolds. And once again, I would like to remind everyone to visit our website, www.exogenynetwork.com. Sign up for the newsletter, wander around, explore the website, and let me know what you think of it. There are links there to take you to blogs, Twitter, and even Facebook. Now, if you want to go straight to the blog, it's giascott.wordpress.com, and you can find out what kinds of things I'm up to lately. And for the program tonight, if you have a question that you wish to have asked, you can email it to me at giascott@exogenynetwork.com. I am monitoring my email during the program tonight and trying very hard not to miss anything. Now, tonight's topic is a topic filled with controversy, and if you would like to ask a question or make a comment, go ahead, email it to me at giascott@exogenynetwork.com, and I'll pass it on from there. If you're listening on a podcast or think of it after the program is finished, go ahead and send it to me. I'll do my best to get your questions answered and your comments added to the website or blog. If you're in the virtual auditorium, go ahead and put it in the text there. I'm trying to keep very hard to catch that as the screen scrolls too. Now, Bonnie, before we go off on our topic again, you want to tell everybody one more time where they can find your website and your books.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Well, my newest novel is called The Magdalene. And that is basically, people who are reading it 3-4 times because each time they read it, they get more and more layers of meaning out of it. I'm very, very thrilled with the reactions that I'm having to it. That can be gotten through my website, BonnieJonesReynolds.com. That's BonnieJonesReynolds.com. Or you can get it through Amazon or Barnes & Nobles, or your local book shop can order it for you. It's iUniverse. iUniverse is the publisher on that, and the book is called The Magdalene. There's another book out at this point called If Only They Could Talk, The Truth About, or rather, The Miracles of Spring Farm, which is about Spring Farm here, which is an animal sanctuary that I co-founded, and which has been figuring in some of the discussions that we've been having this evening, because Spring Farm seems to be kind of in the middle of some kind of an energy vortex that invites strange UFO behavior.
Yeah, because there are places that are consistently regarded as UFO hotspots.
Uh-huh. Well, this is one of them.
Now, okay, this is kind of off on a tangent, but for years I've been collecting stories about what I call the black thing. Now, the black thing. The black thing is not a UFO, and it's not an alien. I'm not really sure what it is, but it is frequently an experience that occurs in UFO hotspots. And I can tell you that normally it involves 2 or more people, and when they have the encounter, they have a abnormal fear reaction to the experience, way beyond normal. I would call it like a primal fear, and it's like it's implanted in your head. And whoever it is, no matter what their normal response is to fearful events, this is going to be above and beyond their normal response. And it chases them out of the area. And it's the closest description I can come to what it looks like because it can occur at night or in the daytime, is that it is like congealed shadows. Or if you've ever seen the movie Ghost, it's like those black things that collected the bad guys.
Oh, God, yeah.
Okay, that's the closest I can come with how it actually looks. But it's a vaguely humanoid shape, and it'll chase you. Now, I've talked to people who have been chased on horseback, on foot, on bicycles, on motorcycles, and in motor vehicles. It always just almost catches them, and the pursuit stops when it gets them out of the area. And the usual thought is, and I know this was very clear in my head when I had my experience, if it catches me, it's a fate worse than death. Now, I have no idea what that is, and this is a very peculiar thought for me anyhow, but it is it's a fear response way beyond anything you would normally have. And I've been in some really terrifying situations in my life. I have never been this terrified. And I had, some of these situations, there was reason to believe that I could conceivably lose my life in the next 30 seconds. I mean, I had real reason to be afraid. And this was an unknown reason, and it was way beyond. Have you had any of those kind of experiences occur near this UFO hotspot?
I am thrilled to say that I have not. And frankly, I'm hoping that I never do. What you're describing is very fearful. No, I'm not aware of anything.
It's not something that people talk about a lot. I know that when I had my experience, I was sure that this was somehow. I was with my first husband. I was sure that somehow he had. It was caused by suggestion or something. I was embarrassed because I'm a person that normally is regarded as by most people as being somewhat brave, or without. I'm not a coward. I'm not a lily-livered coward, as the saying goes. I do things that people regard as brave. I don't see them as brave, but I will pursue things that other people find frightening. Is it because I'm brave or because I'm foolish? We could debate that one. This is something that I was terrified. I was absolutely terrified.
The only thing I've come close to that has been like a poltergeist or ghostly situations, but that
I've seen ghosts. I've seen like I said, I've been in situations that I honestly expected in the next 30 seconds I'm going to die.
Mm-hmm.
I was not that scared.
Yeah.
And, this was a blind panic fear, could not think kind of fear. I have never had I absolutely cannot think fear response.
Almost sounds like some kind of they've got, the military now has these things that will work on your mind from a distance, or they will make you feel like you're on fire from a distance.
This was bizarre. And I've talked to other people because I didn't talk about my experience for well over a year until, now my experience happened in Arizona, until I'm talking to someone else and they had just had an experience in Mississippi.
Huh.
And I went, whoa, they're describing the same thing. So then after, hearing about somebody else's experience, I fessed up, you might say. In both of our cases, the really common thing was this unreasonable fear response, the humanoid shape, the black, the fact that it's chasing you. So then I started asking. And the Internet is such a wonderful way to get in touch with people that you wouldn't meet in the course of your normal day-to-day life.
Right.
And so I've collected stories from Europe, from Australia, from North America, a long list of states in North America. And the experiences are pretty consistent.
Mm-hmm.
And, there again, most people are somewhat ashamed because that fear response is so bizarre. I mean, it really is. as the saying goes, pee in your pants terror. I didn't really, but it was that level of absolute terror. What is it? I don't know. Do I want to ever be in that situation again?
Sounds
no.
like some kind of a mind control situation.
Yeah, I saw this thing chasing us. Everybody saw the thing chasing us. It always just almost catches you, no matter how fast you can go. And like I said, you can be on foot, on horseback. Oh, by the way, animals react to it, too.
Oh, really?
Yeah, the horse reacted to the fear. Bicycle, on foot, motorcycle, and motor vehicle. And it's always two or more people. It never happens with just one person. So maybe with just one person, maybe the fear level is too intense or something. I don't know. Or maybe.
But do both of the people experience that fear, or is it only one?
No, both of them experience fear.
Both of them experience it.
Yeah. It's bizarre. But, anybody that's ever had it does not want to repeat the experience. And the only other thing is, collecting the stories, it sounds like the only weapon that is potentially effective against this thing, whatever it is light. One party shot a handgun at it, and they didn't feel the bullet had any effect, but they did feel the muzzle flash did. So I'll confess, I carry, when I'm out and about in areas where you might call them UFO hotspots, I carry one of those, 10 million watt spotlights. Yeah. That is the only potential weapon I've ever heard that might be effective. Now, I haven't talked to anybody who's ever had a second encounter. So maybe once you've had it, you never have it happen again, I hope. But, since, being the sort of person I am, I have to keep chasing after the UFOs.
Well, okay, let me ask you this. My sister had a strange experience. The same place that my partner saw the cloud with the light coming down out of the cloud at 4:30 in the morning, just up over the hill, that magic hill here where strange things happen. She was driving along, and all of a sudden, the front of her car lifted up off the road. And she drove along, she said it was probably for about 200 feet, doing a back wheel wheelie with both of her front wheels, probably, she thought, at least 2 feet off the ground. And then, then very gently, she lowered back down again. Have you ever heard of anything like that?
No, I would be scared.
Well, my sister is a very down-to-earth person. She came in, and she told me about it, and she never ever mentioned it again. It's like, well, okay, that happened, so that's the end of that.
Anytime that I've had any really strange things occur with a motor vehicle, along those lines, I knew why I was only on two wheels, or I knew why I was, landing hard on the other side of, an obstacle or whatever. I could always explain it because it was because of something I was doing. Because I have gone down the side of a road on two wheels, and do I want to repeat it? No, but, stuff happens. I've been riding in vehicles when things have gone a little wrong, and, but there was always an explanation.
Yeah, there was no explanation for this. None whatsoever. Except that she was in that magic spot where strange things tend to happen.
Well, when you talk about places where strange things happen, along the Iowa-Minnesota border, there's a place called, I think it's Clear Lake Cemetery. It's a cemetery where witches were born, were buried, along with other people in the area. I'm thinking it's Clear Lake. It might not be. Anyhow, there's a cemetery there, and the road went right alongside this cemetery. And there's a lot of local lore about weird stuff that happens there. And, the road would move in front of you, and you would see things and whatnot. And I know a lot of people will go way out of their way to avoid driving that road at night because of weird stuff that would happen out there.
Uh-huh.
When you talk about weird stuff, I mean, this was years ago. I was in college, and a girlfriend and I had a guy friend, and he had a crush on her. And he just wouldn't seem to take no. We're just friends for an answer. And so we were frequently guilty of tormenting him. And he would drink incredible quantities of alcohol, which just would lead to even more torment. This one particular night, we'd driven like 30 miles to a large town where we'd eaten breakfast, like at 2 o'clock in the morning or some ungodly hour, after he'd been out drinking. And then we were all coming back, and I was driving his car because he was inebriated and couldn't drive it. And all three of us were sitting in the front seat of this truck, and he was riding in the middle, or this car, rather. And at the spur of the moment, we often would come up with new ways to torment this poor guy. And as we're driving along, all of a sudden I got the wild idea that I was going to pull off on one of these side roads, and we were going to convince him we were going to leave him out there or something, So I pull off on this road, and I drive a mile or two from the main highway, and I stop. Now, this was in Minnesota, and people who are familiar with Minnesota, a lot of places, the house is gone from the farm. The farmland's been taken over by another farm, nearby. Yeah. There's no longer a house there. There might be trees or some remnants or two of an outbuilding, and the land where the homestead itself used to be is still there, but there is no longer any buildings there, whatever. And that happened to be the case there. And there was a little creek that went right alongside of it that went into a culvert on the road. And that's where I stopped. There was a couple of trees there, too. And I stopped, and it's maybe an hour before dawn. It's real early in the morning. And I stopped, and I turned off the car, and I put the keys in my pocket. And we're still sitting in the car. And it's a spring morning, so we've got the windows down. It's not cold. And the fields are absolutely, totally empty, like spring fields are in Minnesota. Anyhow, we're sitting there, and he's going like, what? We hadn't even said anything yet. And the girlfriend that in question that was with me was named Amy. And with the windows down, you can hear anything that happens outside. Well, we hear outside the vehicle, we hear a voice go, Amy. And I kind of looked at her, and she looked at me, and we're both like, no way, we didn't just hear that. Because there's nobody. You can see there's nobody around us. Nobody knew we were going to be here. We don't know anybody here. We're still, 15, 20 miles from home. There's nobody here. And, we just kind of look at each other over his head, and then we hear it again. Amy. Well, she starts to scream. I'm trying to get the keys out of my pocket. We're trying to get out of there. We take off, and, we never did find an explanation. There's no way anybody that knew us was out there. No way. It was actually the last time we ever tried to do anything mean to him, because every time we tried to be mean to him, something weird would happen. But that was like way weird on the weird scale. Yeah, so anytime you're thinking about doing something mean to somebody, fate might not like it, I guess. Because it scared us both pretty well. And it was just, like I said, there's no way anybody out there knew there was anybody. We could not see a soul. It wasn't dawn yet, but the little moonlight was real bright. You could see for hundreds of yards around the vehicle. There was nobody out there.
Yeah.
where did that voice come from? I don't know.
I had a situation like that.
Oh yeah?
Yeah. It's when I was a kid, and I was doing the dishes one night. I guess I was probably 12 or 13 years old, and it was a beautiful summer's night, and standing with the picture window in front of the kitchen sink open, and all of a sudden, from out of a lilac tree that was about probably 30 feet from the window, came a voice saying, "Bonnie, Bonnie," and that was it. I mean, that was all there was. But I will never forget that moment. And I was called. I mean, I said, okay, I've been called. I don't know what I was called for, but I was called. And there was certainly no one there. Both of my parents were in the living room, and there was nobody else there, but that voice was just as clear as anything.
Yep. Well, there have been occasions too where I'd be asleep and I would hear my mother call my name, come bolt upright. Well, she lives in Arizona. I'm in Louisiana, Mississippi, or wherever, and it sounded like she was right there in the room. And it always would make me uneasy. I always have called her when I've had that happen. Everything's been fine, but it does make me uneasy when I have that happen like that. Because you always wonder. Because one example is my grandmother. I was talking about this just fairly recently. She was my grandparents were going to run some errands, and she was going to go to the post office and stop and visit some people and whatnot. And she forgot some mail that she wanted to mail to the post office. Well, in the process of their errands, between one section and one relative, she was going to go stop by their house. She was going to drive past the house again, and she thought, well, she'll just stop and pick the mail up. Well, she gets in front of the house or the driveway to the house. A voice in her head says, "Don't go home." Well, she thought, huh? And the voice repeated it, "Don't go home." So she didn't. She went on ahead to the relative's house, and they visited there, and then they went home. Now, it turns out that at the time that she was coming back past the house, their house was being robbed. Now, if she had come home,
she would have walked in on it.
She would have walked in on it. And we've all read the headlines about when an elderly couple walks in on a robbery.
Yeah.
It would have been a bad thing. In addition, they did have some guns that were stolen in that particular robbery. And of course, they had ammunition for the said guns too. So, it was probably a good thing that she listened to that voice that day. On occasions when I've had voices tell me, in my case, it wasn't the case of don't go home, the voice told me, "Go home now." I did.
Yeah,
I did. And, what would have happened if I didn't? I don't know. Do I want to know? Probably not.
Yeah, well, that's a different line of research from from UFOs. I doubt that the aliens are sending us these messages.
No,
who knows?
A little bit more
who knows?
Personal.
If the biblical narratives have angels appearing from out of these flying machines, angels with messages. So who knows where our messages come from?
Well, I've often asked here lately, you have people who receive messages or precognition of events that are about to happen. And, I'm like, well, who tells them about this stuff? Where does this information come from? Is it the voice of God that they're hearing? Is it aliens that are telling them? Who's telling them this?
Well, if you when you understand that time is simultaneous, and that past, present, and the future are all happening at exactly the same instant, in the same space, then there's nothing strange about knowing what is going to happen or what is happening, and all of creation is interconnected and intercommunicates. Every atom, every molecule, all is one. All is one huge brain that we are living in, that we are a part of, so that the knowledge that one part of the brain has is actually available to any other part that, if it opens up a channel to receive it.
Yeah, and a lot of people think that if you believe in aliens, you cannot believe in God.
Oh, well, that gets into. I think I might have told you the last time that whenever I start my weekly, I do a television show on cable on local public access here, and I start the show with pictures of the planets of our solar system, and the Earth in comparison to Neptune and Jupiter, and the smaller ones like Mercury and Pluto, and then the next picture shows you Saturn and Jupiter in comparison to the Sun, and you see how small they are, and then the next picture shows you the Sun in comparison into some of the other suns that are huge, where our sun becomes microscopic. You'd have to have the greatest microscope in the world, or the greatest telescope in the world, to see our sun in comparison to some of these other suns that are millions of miles across. And then you find out that those millions of miles across suns are small, are specks of dust in comparison to some of the other suns that are out there. That there are, 230 billion galaxies, known galaxies in our universe. And so where is God in all of this? The answer is that God is all. God is every atom, every molecule. So to not believe in God is one of the stupidest things in the world. But unfortunately, one of the stupidest things in the world is also to believe in God as God is presented to us by some of our religions. The minute you understand that God is all that is, and that God is this huge consciousness of which we are all a part, then it all begins to make sense. And there's no way that you couldn't then believe in God.
Yeah, well, even if you just want to keep it pretty simple, the Christian God, God created the heavens and earth and did his thing there, and on the seventh day rested and all that. Well, I figure that's big enough to create aliens at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
So why not? I don't see where one says the other isn't or is true. It's like saying, well, if elephants are real, there can't really be a God. I mean, the logic just isn't there.
Well, when you realize that there are 250 billion galaxies in our universe, I mean, the idea that we are alone is ridiculous, totally ridiculous. And why in the world would a God have created all of this with this absolutely minuscule dot that is the Earth in all of this vastness? Why in the world would a God have centered all of, quote unquote, his attention on this microscopic dot while creating all of this vastness in which there is nothing? Of course there are aliens out there. Of course there are other cultures. Of course. And with time being simultaneous, they're in many, many different strata of development. There are some that are very primitive, such as ourselves, and then there are some that are incredibly advanced and can skip across.
Yeah, I bet you'll find some that are make us look quite advanced too.
That what?
That make us look quite advanced as well.
Oh yes, I'm sure there are, but absolutely, I don't think that there is any doubt but what they are there, and what we might be seeing also is slips between dimensions. They might be okay. We're three-dimensional creatures. The scientists are beginning to realize there are all kinds of dimensions, all in the same quote-unquote space. You know, like you're in the room where you are right now. There are hundreds of radio transmissions, hundreds of television transmissions. I mean, there are all kinds of dimensions floating there around you in what seems to be empty space. So, I lost my train of thought. What?
Well, when you're talking about dimensions and dimensions slipping, there have been times when I've been standing there, and I can remember one occasion. I was with a group of people. We'd been sky watching, and everybody else had gone off and was kind of doing their thing, and I was just leaning up against a truck, staring out over the water, and all of a sudden, it was as though, I don't know, time shifted, dimensions shifted.
Mm-hmm.
All of a sudden, I wasn't in the same place and time as I had been. Mm-hmm. And, everything was different all of a sudden. I mean, the water was there, the land was here, but everything else was different. And,
shifted into another reality for a moment.
Yeah, it was very unnerving, and I don't know whether I was seeing another time or another dimension or what.
Well, also what you were doing was shifting into a new probability. You can catch it when you slip into a new probability. The world, things suddenly seem. The world, when it happens to me, when I catch myself slipping into a new probability, it's like the world around me kind of shakes and shudders for a moment, and then everything seems different.
I wouldn't say that it shuddered or shook or anything. It was like in the blink of an eye. The trees were different.
Mm-hmm.
It was as though I was in another time, whether past or future, I don't know. The shoreline was slightly different. It was quite eerie. It was quite eerie. And there again, I don't know what exactly happened. I learned that, any time that you relax and, I don't know, blink out or whatever, how you want to put it, it can't happen to you. Can I make it happen? No, but I can set myself up where it's likely to happen. And it works best for me if I'm in an area that doesn't have a lot of, you might say, human meddling, not a lot of buildings and people stuff going on, a more natural environment. Then it's more likely to happen. Maybe it's because there's less stuff involved. I don't know. But it was interesting. What exactly is happening? I don't know. Whether it's a different probability, a different reality, a different time, a different dimension, I don't know.
Well, the aliens might be able to slip in and out of dimensions, and it's possible that just at that moment we are glimpsing this entity or whatever it is slipping between dimensions. The way they
that could be, because when you hear people talking about when they observe these alien entities, a lot of times they talk about them and they move in peculiar manners.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe they're moving way fast. Maybe they're moving jerky.
Mm-hmm.
It's as though something weird is going on with dimensions or time or something. and we're not quite on the same vibration, maybe.
Yeah.
You know, it's interesting, you know, and you know, when you talk about like abduction experiences, you know, people will talk about the physical sensations that are associated with it, or odors that are associated with it, or sounds. And, you know, it's really, really interesting when you hear them talk about the experience in terms of what's going on with them, not what's, you know, going on in terms of aliens or where they're going or what's happening or whatever, just what's going on with them in terms of their physical reality. And, you know, then you associate it, say, with things like angels and religious experiences in you know, ancient times, or even, you know, not so ancient times. You know, the experiences, because people have to put things into terminology and refer to technology that's familiar to them. Okay, I don't know how to move between dimensions or how to move through time. That's unfamiliar technology to me. Do I understand what you know, what digital stuff is and infrared and, you know, that kind of stuff? Yes. But, you know, even if you take stuff we've seen in the movies like Star Trek, and then, you know, when they beam somebody down, somebody suddenly materializes in front of me with some shimmering of the air, I think I might sort of pay attention. But, you know, if somebody comes floating down on a cloud, yeah, I'm gonna notice.
Well, you know, I'm just thinking that there are some situations, like when I was living out in Australia, twice, out in the middle of nowhere, I saw UFOs streak across the sky in front of me. Like, there was one right here at Spring Farm one night when I suddenly looked up, and again, over that magic hill, I saw what appeared to be what I thought was a space capsule crashing. And part of it was a very, very bright, hot pink, and the other part was a phosphorus green, and it was the shape of a capsule, like, you know, when the astronauts come back to Earth and they splash down into the ocean. It was that shape, and it was crashing. It was just plummeting toward Earth, just up over that hill. And I mean, I saw it as plainly as anything, and I thought, oh my God, a space capsule has crashed. And I ran in and I said, oh, there's been a horrible crash. And we're waiting for police sirens and everything, and nothing happened. And I got in the car and I drove up the road. I drove up for miles. Nothing had happened. And the next day, nothing in the newspapers, nothing. But I saw that thing plummeting toward Earth with these incredible unearthly colors. So what did I see? Did I see something that was just slipping in between dimensions and I caught just a sight of it? What?
You know, do people tend to tell you about things spontaneously without you asking or wearing, you know, anything that says, I believe in UFOs? Well, one of those incidents occurred to me. Someone I considered a not very credible witness had told me that he had seen a UFO coming in that was going to crash. It was going to crash on the Navajo reservation. And I'm like, yeah, okay, that's nice. And then a week or so later, it was more than that, it was probably a month later, a Navajo woman, out of the blue, comes up and tells me about this crash that had occurred on the Navajo reservation, on a portion of it where many of the people really didn't speak English, and they lived pretty traditionally. And she's telling me all about this crash that occurred, and she tells me about this, and her English was broken too, about this sparkly stuff that the people who went to see what had happened breathed in. And I'm like, sparkly stuff because you're trying to, there again, you're taking, somebody who's trying to tell you in words they know, and then you're trying to create an image in your head of what they're telling you. I could only conclude that the air was either filled with glittery stuff or that it was phosphorescent in some way and glowing that way, the sparkly air. So this to me sounds like it's probably something toxic. So I asked her, did anybody get sick? And she said, no, nobody got sick. And she said that then government people showed up and told them not to talk about it and sent everybody home and wouldn't let anybody close to where this thing had crashed. And then about a week after that incident, another one comes not too far away and crashes. And the government people showed up sooner, and so nobody had gotten very close to that one. And she didn't know if there was any sparkly stuff in the air or anything else. And I'm like, okay, 2 crashes on the Navajo reservation, along with this third party who was not Navajo. Did something really happen? Maybe. I didn't I wasn't wearing anything that says I believe in UFOs. I've had that, people tell me about stuff out of the blue. I mean, one time I was in Texas at like a McDonald's or something, and I was waiting for some people I was lost. And I was waiting for some people to come and rescue me. And so, the dog and I are just sort of hanging out in the parking lot at this fast food place. And some people come out of the fast food place and proceed to start telling me about UFO stuff. I don't have any jewelry or T-shirts or anything that says UFO. I don't have bumper stickers that say I've been to Roswell. There's nothing about me that says, please tell me about your UFO experiences. But this happens to me all the time. People, not just UFOs, they'll tell me about their ghosts and goblins and all sorts of weird stuff. I must have a sign that says, this invisible neon sign over my head that says, please tell me all the weird stories. Because they do.
Yeah, well, I guess I must have, I don't know whether it's a sign that says, please tell me all the strange stories, but I must have that look of someone who's willing to listen, or someone who will be empathetic, because I do have people suddenly telling me all kinds of things. Very often with me, though, they're telling me their life story and how everything is going wrong with them and whatever.
It has to be more than just one story, because I've had people tell me very intimate details of their life that I really don't want to know about anybody. I've never seen this person before, and I'll never see him again, and I really don't need to know about that portion of your life. Thank you very much. And it would be very intimate details, and it's like, why are these people coming and telling me this stuff? And maybe there's a look that says, I listen.
There was another kind of crash that I saw one night. That was about 1 o'clock in the morning, and I had just come out of the stable, and I looked out over Utica, and suddenly I thought it was an airliner on fire, and it was going on a level trajectory over the city of Utica, and it was flaming. And I thought, I thought that it was an airliner on fire that was ready to explode. And the thing just kept going and then disappeared. And there was no crash that I heard of. I tried the next day to call. I called Rome Air Force Base, and they didn't know anything about it. I called the airport. They didn't know anything about it. But I finally called the state police, and they said, oh, yeah, we got a lot of calls on that. And they gave me the number of a lot of people that had seen it, that had called into the police.
Uh-huh.
And I called them, and we all saw the same thing. We all had the feeling that it was a burning plane that was flying over Utica. But then, just disappeared.
Uh-huh.
But the authorities knew nothing. That we know nothing. like Schultz in Hogan's Heroes, I know nothing.
Yeah, well, it's that giggle factor. Everybody's so afraid of being ridiculed that they don't want to be associated with it. They don't want to have an experience themselves. It's fine to talk about, well, I know this guy and he told me about blah, 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 blah. But it's not okay to say, the other night I was out fishing and I saw, this, and this.
They're out there, guys. They are out there.
Yeah,
we have seen them. We can attest to the fact they are out there. What they are, we don't know, but they are out there. So let's find out. Let's talk. Let's trade stories. Let's be honest about it.
And by talking about it and by not ridiculing people who have, granted, okay, we've got the hoaxers, we've got the nuts, all right? We all know they're out there. We all know what they sound like, and we all know to grab our wallets, okay? But if it's somebody just telling you the story, that doesn't mean that it's going to be another hoax.
Mm-hmm.
And lots and lots of credible people have seen it. Right down from presidents to, janitors and scientists and everybody.
Well, look what happened to poor Dennis Kucinich, who had the guts to say that he had seen one, and they made terrible, they used that against him in the election. The stupid man had thought he had seen a UFO. I think it was Jimmy Carter who also admitted that he had seen one.
Yeah. But you know what, Bonnie? We have run out of time.
Okay.
So I would like to thank you very much for joining us tonight and being such a great guest. I've had a ball.
Oh, thank you. That was fun.
Yeah. Folks, I hope that it has provided all of you with plenty of food for thought and more illumination for your personal journey towards truth. Join us again next week for another episode of The Dawn of Shades. Sure to be another fascinating conversation with our guests. With that, we are out of time. I'm your host, Tia Scott, and good night.